The NBA is really, really hard. Are we asking too much out of Keyonte George? Next on Locked on Jazz. Bum 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 bum.
You are Locked on Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, I'm David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA Insider. In today's edition of Locked on Jazz, we are going to look at, the league's really, really hard, and our guys seem to be wearing out a bit. Keyonte George, please bring me back Lauri Markkanen or Jordan Clarkson. It might be a little too much to ask Keyonte George to be our number one guy at all times. We'll look and dig into what's happening to him. I'd like to wash from my mind any moment which he's played without Lauri Markkanen. JJ Reddick and LeBron James separately had super interesting comments about the NBA, what it takes to be great, and a theory JJ has about what's going on with young players in the NBA, and a Trends Monday as well on a jam-packed edition of Locked on Jazz. As I mentioned, I'm David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA Insider. This is Locked on Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz, giving you insight, expertise, geeky numbers, and hopefully making it way better to be a Jazz fan each and every day. Thank you so much for making Locked on Jazz your first listen of the day. We are free and available on all podcasting apps, as well as on YouTube. To the everydayers, you're the best. Thanks so much. I should have stickers at the Jazz game today, so if you are around and want a sticker, feel free to stop by. Love to give them to you. Today's show is brought to you in part by Prize Picks. Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA to use the code all lowercase LockedOnNBA for your first deposit match up to $100. Well, some of these games are tough, and without Lauri, they're tougher. And the NBA is really, really hard. And our guys are experiencing that right now as we roll out this young lineup, Sensabaugh and Hendricks, and playing Johnny Juzang and Micah Potter and finding out what they have and what it's like. We are seeing pretty clearly how hard this league is. The Jazz have lost, I think, 16 of our last 19 now, if I have that correct. And some of them are getting ugly. 49 points in the first quarter, 88 points, whatever it was last night or 2 nights ago in the first half against Houston is tough. I will say this. I'll say 86 points, I think it was 47 and 86. I'll say two things. I think it's really, really hard. I don't think we have any idea how hard this is on some of our young guys right now. With that said, I don't really think you should ever allow 47 points in the first quarter and 86 points in the first half. Like I just think that's a fair expectation that another team probably shouldn't have an effective field goal percentage of 70%, that another team shouldn't have an offensive rating in the first quarter of a 195, which basically means if they'd run down the floor and dunked every time, they'd score the same amount of points. Okay, so there's definitely a level where we just can't cop out and say it's hard and it's too much and we can't handle it. That doesn't seem to really vibe with who the Utah Jazz want to be. It is, I think the Jazz are playing their sixth game in 8 nights tonight. Okay. So it's hard. Again, not giving them a pass, but it's hard. And we're seeing some things like Bryce Sensabaugh suddenly can't buy a 3-point shot. Hopefully hitting 2 the other night will give him a break. Bryce Sensabaugh was a really, really good shooter in college who all of a sudden, after starting really, really well and then started getting extended time and playing 20 to 30 minutes every other night on probably tired legs, just goes 0 for 3, 0 for 2, 0 for 4, 0 for 5, suddenly, suddenly had missed 14 straight, finds one, then turns around and misses his next 8 or 9. He went 2 for 10 the other night. Hopefully that brings him back around. Taylor Hendricks, who I think is playing really, really well. I think there was a moment I looked at him the other night, and I think his body was like, I'm really out here again. And I think you have to have at least some understanding of of that. I mean, he's playing 28 minutes every night, guarding the toughest guys. And I thought against Houston, he looked like in a little bit against Oklahoma City or Dallas, excuse me, looked like, oh my gosh, I'm out here again. And then the one who I just am a little worried about because I just think we might be asking too much is in games in which Keyonte is playing without Lauri Markkanen. I just wish I could wash those from my memory. I just think we have to be, we as a fan base, and me as an announcer, me or whatever, and as an analyst, like I think asking Keyonte George to play without Lauri Markkanen and without Jordan Clarkson is just too much for him right now. He kind of had it. He's only played with Lauri Markkanen 2 games this month, maybe 3. March 2nd against Miami, and then he played with him in Dallas, and Lauri wasn't very good that night, and he played with him against Minnesota. So he's played 3 games with Lauri this month. Well, in those 3 games with Lauri, if we look at what Keontae's doing, I think we'd be pretty pleased. He's not perfect. Still has, his turnover numbers are probably still higher than we want. He actually has 17 turnovers in those 3 games in which he's played with Lauri, but he's shooting the ball at a rate that's reasonable. He's, I think, 24 of 57. His 3-point shooting is 9 of 23. Those get to be reasonable numbers. He's young. Guards are going to be inefficient. It's hard to figure out where your shots are. He's made amazing progress earlier this year. Like Keyonte was shooting from everywhere on the floor, which was just a sign like he had no idea where his shots were coming from. I remember talking about, but yeah, in his last 3 games with Lauri, he's shooting 42% from the field and 39% from 3. If you go to his last 10 games before that, when he just kind of played with Lauri the whole time, he was 42% from the field and 9% from 3, and he averaged about 15 points a game. Like he was fine. He was really good. Okay, his last 4 or 5 games, when Keontae's played without Lauri, he's 20 of 62 from the field, which is below 33%, and he's 4 of 30 from 3. Like, this is my whole discussion of the Oreo cookie, that the Oreo cookie is fabulously talented and great, and then if you dip it in milk and you dip it the right amount, it really is one of the great delicacies in life. But if you dip it in the milk too much, it falls apart. And then at the bottom of your cup is an Oreo cookie that's not any good anymore. And Keonte George, to me, when he has to play without Lauri Markkanen and without Jordan Clarkson right now, is an over-dipped Oreo cookie. Like that is when you pull it and it's suddenly you've lost your Oreo cookie. His last 3 games, he's 12 of 43 and 3 of 23 from 3. Like clearly that burden of playing without Lauri is wearing him out. And then these guys have never dealt with a struggle before like this at this rate where they have to play all the time. And so therefore it comes at them awfully fast and it builds on itself. So if you go look at Keontae's last 6 games, he's 36% for the field and 18% from 3. So, and his turnover assist ratio is like 1-to-1. It's really hard. This, and like my point on this, I actually feel for him. I hope he doesn't get staggered in his confidence. And I'm certainly not evaluating anything out of Keyonte George as a player from a big picture standpoint when he's playing on the floor without Lauri Markkanen and without Jordan Clarkson. Because I think it's just too much to ask. A 20-year-old against teams that are playing hard, going at him, the number one option around other guys that are young and inexperienced. And for him to have to do that, I think it's too much. And it's evident it's too much. He's not ready for that. May have Lauri and Jordan back tonight against Dallas, which would be awfully nice for him. But it's hard. And yeah, I think there should be a level that you're not allowing 86 points in the first half of a basketball game. Now, there's not a lot you can do when a team shoots the way Houston did. That was a little silly. And we're running into a weird thing where teams are just shooting the ball against us at a crazy rate. I went and looked at it the other day on the plane. And if you look at threes from 4 to 6 feet, so that means the guy's open. He's open from 4 feet or more. So he's open by 4 feet or more. So the first thing is, yeah, that's pretty open. Okay. And the league average is 37.5% on those shots. And teams are shooting 40.1% against us. Only Sacramento has worse numbers. Now, we're a little culpable and we're allowing 33 of those shots a night, which is the second most of any team in the NBA. And equally culpable that we're allowing 25 open threes a night, which is the third most of any team in the league. And if you take 4 feet all the way out, we allow only Chicago and New Orleans allows more. Now, New Orleans, interestingly, teams are shooting 35% compared to 40% against us. So there's a little something going on where we are having bad luck here. This should I don't know when it straightens out, hopefully next year. Because at this point, I don't know anyone wants it straightening out this year. But there's about a 3 percentage point bad luck we're having right now it's supposed to narrow down. And the league average is 37.5. All but 3 teams are within like 1.3 percentage points of that on about either side on the standard deviation. Pelicans, Rockets, and Timberwolves have gotten fortunate. Atlanta, Utah, and Sacramento have gotten unfortunate. But so be it. All right, 2 super interesting comments and podcasts I listened to this week I want to share with you and then hear your thoughts on them in the chat room and else. So we're just getting started here on Locked On Jazz. Locked On Jazz today is brought to you by Murdoch Chevy, located in Woods Cross and in Logan. 2 locations, one right off the freeway in Woods Cross, and it's the Chevy trucks. It's the Chevy lineup. It's Chevy. It's Americana. It's the Murdochs of plus 80 years in Utah. It's a fabulous combination, and right now, great deals going on at Chevy as well. The new Chevy EV Blazer is out as and absolutely fabulous for you. The SUV lineups is really great. Obviously, the Suburban and Tahoe are well known. Then the Blazer and Trailblazer with the Traverse, the Equinox, and the Trax gives you a great lineup of SUVs, and the trucks, somewhat unprecedented. The Colorado, within the multiple models of the Silverado truck, which is just the granddaddy of them all. It is over at Murdoch Chevy, located in Woods Cross and in Logan. Please feel free to email me first at dlock09@gmail.com so that we can make sure that we give you your VIP experience you deserve as a Locked On everydayer. Today's show is also brought to you by Robinhood. Did you know that even if you have a 401k retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has only IRA that gives you 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, so you've got a whole month, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts up to a 3% match. That's right, no cap on a 3% match. Robinhood Gold gives you the most of your retirement thanks to IRA with 3% match. This offer is only good through April 30th, so get started at robinhood.com/boost. That's robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info. By the way, you're getting like a 3% raise. That's so cool. Claim on a Q1 2024 validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 per year from to date. A 3% match must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC is a registered broker dealer. Thanks so much for making Locked On Jazz your first listen of the day. I'm David Locke. Thank you. All right, here, this is kind of cool. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on TV all day? Have you turned down the volume with all the shouting? Then make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news from the local experts, streaming 24/7 on YouTube and free on Amazon Fire TV apps, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. It's Locked On Sports Today, Amazon Fire TV, or on YouTube. Make sure you grab it. So JJ Reddick was doing a podcast, and he was talking with Tim Legler, and he was talking about he was talking to Jaime Jaquez of Miami. And he talked about how when he went to Duke, it was right after Corey Maggette and William Avery and a bunch of guys had just left early. And Coach Krzyzewski said to them, I need you to unpack. I need you to unpack. I don't know how long you're going to be here. I don't know how long your tenure is here, but I need you to unpack. And it was an interesting concept and a great analogy. And then JJ was talking about it, was his kind of belief today on what is happening with some of the young players in America, particularly, is that they've never unpacked. So you take a player, they may go to multiple high schools, right? They end up staying at high school for a few years, and then they transfer to another one to get more out of it. And then they might even play multiple AAU teams along the way, where they switch from one AAU team to the other in the process. And then they go to college for a single year. They never unpack. And then they go to the NBA. And then they kind of have to unpack for a little while. But the impact of, so it's interesting. I mean, frankly, Keyonte fits it a little bit. He played 3 years of high school at Louisville High School. And then after his junior season, he, actually, Keyonte fits this perfectly because he played 2 years in high school at, and then his junior year, he transferred. And then his senior year, he moved to IMG Bradenton, Florida. So he has not been, Keyonte in 4 years has not been anywhere for more than a year. I don't know about Taylor and Bryce, and this really isn't about them, but it's an interesting concept about young players. So the concept is from this is JJ Reddick's hypothesis, doesn't necessarily have to be factual, is that, and by the way, Taylor switched schools as well. So he's somewhat similar. He transferred after his sophomore year. So he went freshman, sophomore, then he went 2 years to the Calvary Christian Academy after his sophomore year. And then he went to UCF for 1 year. So he's been somewhere for 2 years, but he kind of unpacked. His theory is that if you don't unpack, the impact is that, one, you're not really worried about the fundamentals, because part of knowing about the fundamentals when a coach is coaching you is knowing that, hey, for the next 2 or 3 years, this coach is going to be working on me. We're going to be wearing these things. I might as well do it right. And I got to learn these things. And now this also assumes that coaches are teaching the fundamentals, which I think is somewhat of a debate. I sometimes watch some of our kids come in from 4 years of college and watching and wondering, how is this possible that they went to 4 years at this college with this big name coach and then they can't do these things well. So I'll tell you what, it's not, this hypothesis by JJ Reddick is not foolproof. It just sounds great, it's worth discussing. So his point is, on one, is that you're not getting all the fundamentals. You're not staying as dug in as you might want to be, as somebody would be if they're going to be there for 2 or 3 or 4 years. And the second thing is that you're not playing to win the same way. That you're really not invested in the win. Like, hey, you know what? You lost in the NCAA tournament and I'm going pro, so it's fine. Or, you know what? I'm not actually going to be here for high school next year because I'm looking for the next thing. And that really has an impact on how some of the young, particularly American players, come into our game. I thought it was a fascinating discussion. I've sent it to a bunch of people around the league. We've held multiple conversations about it. And I thought it was worth time. That just, who are these guys that unpack? And so, you look at this year's draft, and obviously Jaime Jaquez has been kind of the surprise of this draft, but he certainly had to unpack. He was at UCLA for 4 years. This doesn't mean that you necessarily go get guys that are 4-year players, because frankly, if they're good enough, then they probably go to the NBA earlier than 4 years. But it's an interesting concept, just at least on who's unpacked and who hasn't, in a way to maybe analyze some players. I'm not sure I would be making, decisions. Like I still want to draft Keyonte George. I still probably want to draft Taylor Hendricks. Brandon Miller, who was the second pick of the draft, who's really, really good. I don't know anything about his background, but regardless of whether he unpacked or not, I would like to have him on my team. I also don't know anything about him. Brandon Miller seemed to have played 4 years at the same high school, and then he played 1 season at Alabama, and then became really good number 2 pick of the draft. I'm not sure, would you define Scoot Henderson as unpacking? Probably not. And I don't know how you deal with Amon Thompson and Nasur Thompson, who are both overtime elite players. So it's an interesting concept. I don't know that I think it's foolproof, and I'm not sure that I would be drafting based on it, but I think it is an interesting kind of approach on how things work. I mean, I have my own personal theory, which is the problem with our specialization in sports is not only are we not creating good enough athletes, But when you specialize kids at 9 or 10 years old and they go play one sport for 12 months, they're guaranteed to be good. Like they may not be NBA good, or they may not be pro good, or even college good, but they're guaranteed to be good. And there's some value to being bad at stuff. There's some value to having your kids actually learn how to struggle and not be very good at stuff. And so I think that's, that's my other problem is, we've created a world where we make sure our kids never fail at anything. And then when they hit adversity, they're not quite sure what to do. There's a little of unpacking in there as well. I'm not this anti-transfer portal transfer kid. I actually think it's great. I go the other way. I think it's good it's good, but it does mean like if you're not going to pack, and these kids aren't unpacking, they're checking to see whether they should unpack first in school. The second one was LeBron. He did a podcast with JJ Reddick in their new podcast, which is good. And neither of these are by Locked On, so I really shouldn't be promoting them, but they're really good. And LeBron was asked what he thought the 3 things that make a great player are. And the first one he said was history of the game. And the third thing he said was basketball IQ. And they then had a high level basketball conversation, which is pretty geeky and pretty fun. And the middle one was sacrificing loved ones. Sacrificing loved ones. And he talked about, like, even now, 20 years in the league, like in the offseason, he gets up at a certain time and he goes, works out, and then he comes back and he naps. And then when he gets back up, he probably goes, works out again. And the entire family has to live their entire life around his schedule. Every ounce of food that's ever eaten in the house is based on what he's eating or not eating. And basically, you're sacrificing loved ones for the quest for your greatness. And it's an incredible concept. And it's one that, as we have this young team, there's just no possible way that our guys understand this yet. Like, they're going to, and nor does any human. Everyone is going to try to see if they can be great some other way first. Can I be great without sacrificing loved ones? Can I be great without the extra effort? Can I be great without doing, like, how, am I so great that I can get away without doing? That's what everyone's going to try to do. Because that's the human natural instinct. That's not a criticism of any of our players or any other, but that's what young players are going to do. They're going to try to see if they can get through this process without having to sacrifice loved ones. And then they're going to find out if you want to be great, you sacrifice loved ones. And there's a great moment in the podcast where LeBron says, literally, every now and then you look around like, oh, where'd he go? I'm like, oh, he didn't want to sacrifice loved ones. He's gone. He's out of the league. Ron Boone talks about, you got 3.5. Like, don't get labeled as a guy who doesn't play hard because you only got 3.5 in this league. If you don't play hard, you're here for 3.5 years, you go home. And then no one cares about you ever again in that same way. And you don't get back in. And guys do disappear in this league all the time. So I just thought those 2 things were super interesting. And I thought really interesting just in trying to understand what we're watching every night in who the young players are that we're seeing out on the floor for the Utah Jazz and what they're going through and what their process are. I feel for these guys. I've said this all year long. It's been a fascinating year for me personally, watching them as humans when they're the same age as my kids. And despite all the money they're making, I'm certain I would not change spots with my kids and them. I would much rather have my kid living a normal life like they're living than what these kids are living, even with all the money. It's just, this is so anti what the appropriate developmental process for these kids is at this time. And it's so hard. All right. Well, Trends Monday. Who's doing what in the league? The Houston Rockets are doing a lot. Who else is hot? Who else is trending in the right or wrong direction? Who might be pulling off the gas pedal as they head down the stretch? We'll look at those things as we continue here on Locked On Jazz. Today's show and the upcoming segment is brought to you by eBay Motors. Your ride or die getting taken care of by the 122 million parts at eBay Motors. They have everything to maintain your vehicle, level it up to peak performance. You name it, eBay Motors has you covered. You can find exactly what you're looking for, and with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back, because eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP. Bring home the win with eBay Motors and keep your ride or die alive. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay's Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. It's eBay Motors, the Guaranteed Fit with 122 million parts available. Today's show is also brought to you by Prize Picks. Get in on the action at prizepicks.com/locked-on, and we use the promo code LOCKEDONNBA for your first deposit match up to $100. It's Demons time on Prize Picks, the #1 fantasy app with over 3 million members, where the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. It's just you against the numbers. You pick more or less than 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Demon time on Prize Picks now means you can win up to 100 times your money with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into 1,000. Demons and Goblins are the newest and most exciting way to play Prize Picks. Squares marked with demons, red demons, and green goblins give you different payouts, and you now win up to 100 times your money with as little as 4 correct picks. So get on it right now and join in with Prize Picks. Have a good night on the NBA with it. PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use the code LockedOnNBA for your first deposit match up to $100. That's PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNBA using the code LockedOnNBA. It's the PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Sorry, get you a first deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Easy for me to say. Pick more, pick less. It's easy. Thanks so much for making Locked On Jazz your first listen of the day. We are free and available on all podcasting apps. All right, we do this every Monday, or we try to do it every Monday. By the way, great Locked On NBA show today. Heat, Kings, and Magic check-ins today on Locked On NBA with Jackson Gatlin. Locked On NFL every Monday is super also, as Kevin Ostreicher runs across the top stories of the league. So make sure you check out both those two things here. All right, I like to check out the last 10 games, and then we'll check out the last 2 weeks. So in the last 10 games, the hottest team in the NBA is the Boston Celtics still, then the Houston Rockets, then the New Orleans Pelicans, Sacramento Kings have clicked in a little bit here, Indiana Pacers, and the New York Knicks. Knicks getting healthy. The top offense in the NBA, Boston, Houston, as we saw the other night, Lakers, Phoenix, Clippers, Indiana. So the top, for the last 2 weeks, the hottest offenses are Boston, Houston, Lakers, Suns, Clippers, and Indiana. Teams that cannot score right now are Charlotte, Toronto, Philadelphia 76ers, though they won last night. Detroit, Memphis, and Cleveland really having a hard time scoring. The top defenses in the NBA over the last 10 games are New York, the Pelicans, New York by a long shot, by 3.5 points over everybody else. Pelicans, Kings, Magic, Heat. So the Heat suddenly digging in a little bit with the 76ers in there as well. The teams that are not defending are the Jazz by 4 points more than anyone else in the NBA. Bulls, Clippers, Blazers, Raptors, and Bucks. So Doc Rivers may not have totally turned the corner on that. And again, the hottest teams, Boston, Houston, Pelicans, Kings, Pacers, and Knicks. Coldest teams, Raptors, Jazz, Hornets. Congratulations to Raptors. They've lost 10 straight and got into the playoff position, so they get their pick back. With Detroit, Portland, and then Cleveland really struggling as well. They've lost 7 of 10. Let's go to the last 2 weeks, see if there's any trend difference there. It's interesting not to see Denver in there at all. Denver's been playing so well, but maybe they have kind of cooled the Jets a little bit. But we'll see, because they're in Milwaukee and Oklahoma City are still battling for that spot. OKC losing last night. Good win by Minnesota. Bad loss by the Warriors. Houston is coming. All right, last 2 weeks, Houston's #1, Boston 2, Orlando 3, Minnesota 4, Dallas 5. So the team we're playing tonight over the last 2 weeks is the 5th hottest team in the league with the 12th hottest offense and the 4th best defense in the NBA. Sacramento clicking in as well. They've won 5 of 7. Teams that are struggling the most: Charlotte, Utah, Toronto, Washington, Brooklyn, and Portland. No surprise, Detroit as well. In their hottest offenses in the NBA over the last 2 weeks, Boston, Houston, Lakers, Phoenix, Milwaukee, Indiana. So that's somewhat similar. Minnesota, interestingly, even without Karl Anthony Towns, and they've won 5 of their last 6 still, are turning around at a 120 offensive rating. Teams that are having a hard time scoring are Charlotte, Toronto, Detroit, San Antonio, Brooklyn, Washington, and Memphis. We don't have any of those teams on our schedule left. That's unfortunate. Defenses, Knicks, #1 defense over the last 2 weeks is Orlando. So the Knicks backs out a little bit. Sacramento really D'ing up over the last 2 weeks with some great defense. Keep an eye on that. New York, #3, Dallas, #4 defensively, Miami 5, and Minnesota 6. No surprise. Denver's just kind of coupling around, by the way. They're the 9th best team, 9th best offense, 9th best defense. They're just chilling. The defenses in the last 2 weeks, Utah's last. Chicago, Clippers, that's interesting. Clippers have stopped defending. Everyone's talking about how stagnant the offense is. What they've really done is stop defending. Washington, Portland, Atlanta, and then the Lakers as well. What was the game last night? Oklahoma City got crushed by Milwaukee last night, and Golden State lost, and the Clippers lost at home to Philadelphia yesterday, 121-107 in a game that, I mean, no Joel Embiid probably shouldn't happen. But so that one's interesting. What's going on? The Clippers are a little bit of like, keep an eye on that. That's weird what's taking place right now. All right, that is your Trends Monday. Jazz and the Dallas Mavericks. That's available on Sirius XM tonight, as well as on your Utah Jazz app. Ron and I will have fun. We always do. So stay with us for it. Come and join us on the broadcast. We'll be with you postcast right after the game. Thanks so much for tuning in to Locked On Jazz. We now send you the first ever 24/7 national sports channel. It's called Locked On Sports Today. It's also available on Amazon Fire TV, and it's all for free. Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today.